Good morning. Thank you for attending our presentation entitled Decolonial Bias Awareness in EFL ESP through Appraisal Strategies. My name is Rosa Gimenez and I will be presenting the first part of this session, followed by my colleague Francisco Ivorra, who will lead the second half. We are both members of the Decolan Research Group here at the University of Valencia, which is part of the SILVA Research Group, a team founded in 2013 and specialized in linguistic variation, pragmatics, and corpus analysis. Moving on to our introduction, our research has a double focus. First, we aim to raise awareness among EFL and ESP students regarding the crucial role of English in decolonial communication, specifically as a tool for empowering minority voices. Second, we highlight the value of linguistic analysis methods, such as appraisal theory and visual grammar, in identifying and interpreting decolonial attitudes. Building on these foundations, the aim of the present study is to use these frameworks to help EFL learners explore how appraisal language can actively contest decolonial perspectives within multimodal genres. Our research framework is deeply rooted in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically focusing on Goal 4, quality education, and Goal 5, gender equality. As shown in this diagram, we follow them through two main paths. First, by challenging traditional historical narratives to give a voice to previously silenced women and social minorities within the English-speaking world. And second, by employing ICT and AI tools to generate inclusive multimedia content and fictional biographies. Our theoretical approach is based on the idea that decolonial research in English communication emerges as a response from marginalized communities to long-standing Eurocentric and Western perspectives. The goal is to challenge the power structures that create inequality and to address the conflicts associated with identity, race, gender, class, and origin. It also examines how language can serve as a tool to empower these marginalized communities. While this movement began mainly with academics, activists, and policymakers, it has now expanded into the business world. Many entrepreneurs and corporate leaders are adopting decolonial practices, especially in ethical sourcing, gender equity, anti-racist work, indigenous and immigrant rights, and fair economic models. On this slide, we outline what decolonial English actually looks like in practice. It isn't just about correct grammar. It's about linguistic diversity and renewal. The colonial English challenges colonial linguistic norms by integrating markers in both form and content that align with the DEI principles: diversity, equity, and inclusion. For instance, it incorporates alternative non-Western grammatical structures and vocabulary reflecting the plurality of English speakers worldwide, and embraces gender-neutral and anti-discriminatory markers to promote equitable communication. It also prioritizes metadiscursive tactics to modulate emphasis. It integrates diverse English varieties and regional dialects, acknowledging their cultural significance, and supports the dignity and renewal of indigenous languages, marginalized varieties, pointing out that the acceptance of multilingualism and hybridity is fundamental to linguistic justice. It also encourages the spread of local heritage, promoting native oral narratives, storytelling practices, communal legends and folklore, and also culturally significant idioms. At the heart of all this is the promotion of ethical discourse, fair, inclusive, and mindful communication, and the rejection of hate speech, bias, and offensive language. Drawing on these premises, we would like to answer the following research questions. First, what appraisal markers are used in English to convey a decolonial perspective in EFL-ESP? Then, what multisemiotic appraising resources interact with English to articulate decolonial positions in today's global discourse? And the last one, can language teaching make decolonial perspectives more visible? To answer these questions and conduct our study, we draw on several analytical models. First, the appraisal theory framework, which is rooted in systemic functional linguistics, developed by Haliri in the 70s, which divides meaning-making into the three well-known metafunctions, ideational, textual, and interpersonal, sitting between interpersonality theory and meta-discourse theory. Within appraisal theory, we work on its main the three main subsystems: attitude, which includes the linguistic resources used to evaluate feelings, people's character and behavior; also engagement, which covers the ways speakers bring other voices into the discourse; and graduation, which deals with how speakers scale or intensify meanings. We also apply visual grammar principles as presented by Kress and Van Leeuwen in 2020, which work through three dimensions of meaning: representational, interactive, and compositional meaning. Regarding our procedure, we begin by assessing a student's awareness through a targeted survey. This helps us understand how they perceive English as a tool for decolonial communication. Then we move into a highly creative phase where students produce fictional interviews, applying what they've learned about appraisal strategies to real-world contexts. To ensure reliable findings, we use mixed methods approach for data analysis. By leveraging corpus tools like a sketch engine, we can provide a detailed quantitative account of the linguistic choices students make during this process. Well, this concludes my section. Thank you very much for your attention. My colleague Francisco will now continue with the results.
Hi, I'm Francisco Ivorra, and I'm going to continue with the second part of this research. The first part of the survey was directed towards raising awareness among students about the role of the English language to construe a decolonial world. As for the ways in which the English language has exposed inequalities and negative consequences of new colonial perspectives and practices, and the extent to which it has affected women and social minorities, the findings unveil the most frequent words used in their comments. These demonstrate that the English language may be considered as a vehicle of colonial expansion, unearthing the inequities of new colonialist practices in different ways. This could be the marginalization of indigenous languages, economic disparities, and the privilege given to Western knowledge. Judging by the most frequent terms incorporated in their comments, the English language has dominated a wide range of professional spheres, such as academia, business, and the media, creating obstacles for non-English speakers. This unbalanced opportunities has affected women and social minorities facing discrimination by means of gendered language structures, exclusion from the economic fields, and the underprivileged non-Western identities. This is the case of migrant women who have experienced linguistic discrimination in the professional field, as well as indigenous gender and sexual identities, who have been historically suppressed through English binary framework. The same applies to global views and perceptions, which are often shaped by English-centric narratives, triggering the creation of stereotypes and silencing minority voices. In summary, students demonstrate that they are aware of the fact that systemic inequalities are caused by linguistic imperialism. From a more linguistic level, some students point out that the supremacy of the English language has historically emphasized male perspectives, such as mankind, to refer to humanity, or guys, to refer to a group of people, including both men and women. This is also reflected in the use of courtesy titles to distinguish unmarried women from a single one, for example, Miss versus Mrs., unveiling gender biases. Here, some examples of comments made by students. The English language can expose a wide variety of inequities and negative consequences of the practices and perspectives of neo-colonialism regarding women and social minorities, both internally in English-speaking countries and internationally. Many scholars, activists, and journalists use English to discuss the harmful effects of neo-colonialism. This phenomenon is inappropriate and affects women and social minorities by reinforcing stereotypes. Or the English language serves as a tool to impose the Western culture or values on other societies. This affects women and social minorities because of the presence of gendered and racialized language and structures. In terms of equality, or how the English language has contributed to equalizing the representation of women not fitting the white, highly feminine, healthy, heterosexual, and wealthy archetype, the most frequent words incorporated into the students' comments, inclusive, media, diverse, experiences, identities, visibility, empowering, reveal the English language may contribute to equalized representation by including inclusive, intersectional, and decolonialized narratives, giving rise to the amplification of women's voices who have been frequently marginalized by race, class, gender identity, ability, and sexuality. For instance, stories of non-white, non-wealthy, LGBTQ+, and disabled women have been reflected in media, literature, and academia. Importance is also given to how the representation of these social minority groups appears on social media and social platforms. Indeed, these activist movements make use of the English language to amplify the voice of Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, disabled, and working class women. This is also manifested in books, movies, featuring diverse women to rewrite the narrative, making a space for everybody. Therefore, students seem to underline that even though the English language reinforces colonial and neo-colonial views characterized by a patriarchal system, it also somehow connects and empowers, as we have mainly seen in the case of literature written in English by Black women. In other words, women use English to share their experiences through literature and social media, through which they challenge stereotypes and make people have a more understanding perspective of social minority groups. From a more linguistic angle, students claim that English is a more neutral language where one can see inclusiveness and equality. This is the case of gender-neutral terms, for example, they versus them, to refer to both men and women. On this slide, you can see some examples of comments made by students. All of them reflect the findings previously discussed. For example, English can help by using gender-neutral terms, promote or hire more women with some different features, talk about it more, books, audiobooks, arts boards. English can serve as a vehicular language to bring the message of minorities or non-stereotypical women to the mainstream public. It can be used in discourse, blogs, social media, and even politics to convey the ideas and concerns of these minorities. As regards visibility, a high frequency has been found in words such as women, social, literature, and conventional platforms, communities, marginalized, which are similar to those encountered in the equality dimension. As such, students, through their comments, reveal that through media and academia, the English language has given visibility to social minority groups, particularly marginalized women. For instance, movements such as Me Too and Black Lives Matter have popularized intersectional feminism by obtaining rights on gender equality and discrimination. English has played a significant role in raising visibility for unconventional female stereotypes. From social media, literature, academic publishing, cinema, the dominant narrative has been reshaped by being more aware of these minorities who have platforms in which they can raise their voices and be seen by others who will support them. Diverse experiences of race, gender, and sexuality by writers such as Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, and Ocean Vuong can be seen in literature. Social media movements such as Say Her Name and Disability Too exposed violence against Black women and disabled persons. English language journalism and film portray LGBTQ+ and non-Western narratives. Additionally, English is used to advocate for gender and racial equality in international human rights policies and educational courses. These are some examples of comments made by students towards the visibility perspective. The English language has played a crucial role in shaping visibility for marginalized and stereotyped groups. By evolving and adapting, it has the potential not only to raise visibility, but also challenge and dismantle the dominant narratives that exclude unconventional women and minority social groups in different aspects of life. The use of the English language can also contribute to raise visibility of minority social groups, such as enhancing the use of neutral pronouns in terms of gender and sexuality, or terms belonging to a particular community, such as African Americans, for example. As regards action, high-frequency words such as media, social, discrimination, activism, movements, advocacy, platforms unearth that the English language has highly contributed to denouncing the inequality and damaging manifestations faced by women due to their race, gender, class, sexuality, or background. For example, through literature and social media, the dissemination of feminist and anti-discrimination movements has been facilitated by the English language. This is the case of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, which make people aware of systemic violence, oppression, and inequality. Through the English language, peripheral women have been able to spread their personal stories, focusing on social injustices and demand change. By means of literature, journalism, and social media, women have used English to draw attention to issues like workplace discrimination, gender-based violence, reproductive rights, and systemic racism. Added to that, the ability to name and discuss these injustices in English through terms like intersectionality or gender-based violence provides women with a language to articulate their experiences and claim change. These quantitative findings are reflected in the following comments made by students. For instance, thanks to the English language, some fights against inequalities or damaging manifestations have been highlighted, such as Me Too or Black Lives Matter. Journalism, literature, and social media in English have helped uncover harmful practices such as gender-based violence, pay gaps, and racial discrimination. Activists and writers use English to challenge stereotypes, educate the public, and push for laws that protect marginalized communities. About how the English language and figures have contributed to disseminating colonialism worldwide, and particularly on women, the most frequent words used by students in their answers are social, movements, political, language, voices, black, Toni Morrison, global, or injustices. In other words, students give importance to the influence of literature and the media through which the English language has contributed to decolonialism, particularly the struggles of women of color. It is by means of storytelling and literary masterpieces that dominant narratives are challenged and the way gender identity is understood is reshaped. The same applies to how digital platforms have been particularly relevant when it comes to disseminating decolonialism, empowering movements with international support. Overall, decolonialism has been promoted and disseminated by literature, as seen in the works by Toni Morrison, Angela Davis, among many other acclaimed writers who have challenged power structures by creating a more inclusive and fair world in terms of equality. These findings can be reflected in the following comments made by students. For example, among the various forms of decolonial manifestations, literary and cultural movements have had a profound impact in shifting narratives and dismantling colonial ideologies. The most significant contributions to the advancement of decolonialism have come from literary, cultural, and political expressions, influencing public opinion and promoting structural reforms. As students seem to have a wide knowledge of how decolonialism has been given equality, visibility, action, and dissemination through the English language around the world, We were also interested in exploring if students were able to decipher the use of colonial and decolonial language from a more linguistic perspective. As such, Martin and White's appraisal theory may be considered a good model of analysis for dismantling social inequalities through language. After explaining this model of analysis to the students, they had to analyze and discuss an opinion article on diversity in which they had to identify and comment on the different attitudinal and engagement markers used by the writer to provide a stance towards the information conveyed in the text and to interact with potential readers. The article is entitled "Their Voices Ask Them to Lead Diversity Reviews," which was drawn from the North American newspaper, the New York Times. In this table, we can observe the frequencies obtained for attitudinal markers such as affect, judgment, and appreciation. And on this slide, we can see how students discuss the different markers spotted in the text. In the text, we can find several instances of attitudinal affect linguistic markers. For instance, the words shocked, perturbing, and no wonder show the author's emotional response. In the case of men's reluctance to care for themselves, it is especially perturbing when it comes to mental health. This is a criticism of traditional masculinity and evaluates men's behavior negatively, portraying it as a harmful negligence within the business context. Or here we can see an example of attitude appreciation. Rationally, pretty sweet deal, more flexible understanding, great for men too. These markers positively evaluate gender equality and feminism, framing them as beneficial and logical solutions regarding entrepreneurs. They help shape the reader's perception of feminism as not just fair, but also pragmatically advantageous for men. Likewise, students had to identify and discuss the different engagement markers used by the writer of the text to interact with potential readers. These are the most frequent words included in the students' comments when discussing the monoglossic and heteroglossic utterances spotted in the text. On this slide, you can also observe the frequencies obtained in the use of heteroglossic markers. These are some examples of how students discuss both the monoglossic and heteroglossic utterances identified in the text. For example, these monoglossic statements present the author's central claims as facts rather than contestable positions. This rhetorical strategy creates an authoritative tone and presents the benefits of feminism for men as settled knowledge rather than debate theory. Yes, the author does make use of heteroglossic utterances in the article, recognizing alternative positions or viewpoints, particularly those of men's rights activists and opponents of feminism. Another example is, if men's rights activists really want to improve men's lives, then they should join feminists in dismantling bygone ideals of masculinity in the business world. This suggests that the author is recognizing the position of men's rights activists, but also offering a counter-argument. Part number 3 of the survey consisted in making students aware of the different multisemiotic elements incorporated in a photograph of that same opinion article. The image depicts a large public demonstration with a prominent banner reading "Defend Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, Pursue Economic Opportunity for All." It takes place outside a grand historical building, possibly a government institution, with a crowd of people, particularly women, protesting about gender equality. To carry out the analysis, students had to follow Crescent van Loven's visual grammar. For example, students had to analyze the representation of meaning, which visually captures the essence of events, participants, and the environment in the images. It is intertwined with Halliday's ideational metafunction of language. For example, the students had to spot the represented participants, whether they are animate or inanimate, the processes or the activities described, the attributes or the qualities of the participants, as well as the circumstances in which the action is being developed. In a similar vein, they had to analyze the interpersonal meaning. Variables such as gaze, expression, gestures, angles, short distance. In other words, they had to explore the relationships between the visual, the producer, and the viewer, together with analysis of the intersemiotic mood in both verbal and visual modes. The interpersonal meaning, as we know, is related to Halliday's interaction of metafunction of language. Finally, students have to analyze the compositional meaning of the image. The compositional meaning requires studying the aspects related to the layout of the page to determine the extent to which the visual and verbal elements achieve a sense of coherence within the whole unit. It refers to the composition of the whole, that is, how the representational and interactive elements are made to relate to each other. In fact, this correlates with Halliday's textual metafunction of language. Therefore, students have to explore variables such as salience, framing, layout, among many other compositional variables. The following table shows the words with the highest frequencies included in the students' comments when they identified and discussed the different multisemiotic appraisal resources related to representation, interpersonality, and composition. Here are some comments made by students towards the multisemiotic analysis of the image in terms of representation, interpersonality, and composition. For example, there is a strong contrast between the purple protest sign held by lively protesters and the dual lightless building favoring the first. Dark tones represent struggle and more vibrant colors represent resilience. The picture is a close-up of a crowd, and the angle is almost a perfect first-person view, creating some intimacy, as if the reader could be part of the protest. The use of colors in the image is also very important. The pink protest sign stands out in the black tones of buildings and crowd, making sure that the message is visible. Moreover, pink is often associated with feminism, fighting against gender oppression. Moreover, the visual contact in the image is a demonstration of solidarity among the protesters. Part 3 consisted of making students aware of how the colonial English can be made more visible. Hence, in Activity 1, students had to name 2 English-speaking figures who have notably contributed to female and/or minority groups through their contributions to the world. As revealed in their comments, relevant business people such as Scott Hubbard, Stephen Bartlett, Kyrineu Karim, or Tanya Larson stand out. Here we can see some comments made by students towards these figures. In Activity 2, students had to watch an interview with the famous business leader Mundanara Bales and spot the appraisal markers that unveiled a colonial or decolonial perspective. In the last activity, students had to compose their fictional biographical and professional interview in English about one of the personas they had previously researched. This activity was aimed at developing their ability to orally produce evaluative markers and making use of multisemiotic elements that could reveal a de- or colonial perspective. As in the previous activity, this was also aimed at developing oral skills in English. To conclude our research, we can say that English linguistics can make the colonial ideologies much more visible and much easier to identify, understand, explain, illustrate, and disseminate in the field of EFL or ESP. Instruction in basic linguistic concepts and analysis techniques is very valuable in educating learners on the intricacies of contemporary decolonial communication. Likewise, EFL or ESP learners can be equipped with philological tools to promote gender and social inclusion. It goes without saying that applications can also be used to encourage participation and gather the opinions of students with surveys. This is the case of Google Forms. Digitalization can also be a vehicle to represent, bring to the present, and what is even more important in our view, to disseminate the voice of both contemporary and historically silent social segments, for example, through live fictional interviews. The findings of our research unveiled different important implications. For example, one of the most relevant implications in our view is acknowledging and increasing the visibility of social minority groups' contributions and social equality rights defenders in Anglophone countries across diverse disciplines, including English foreign language and English for specific purposes. We can also support social justice by challenging traditional historical narratives and giving voice to previously silent social minority groups. We can also disseminate content created by students through written stories and multimedia artifacts. We can organize interdisciplinary competitions where the best written narratives, for example, and digital creations are awarded. We can also transform teaching practices by incorporating feminist and decolonial perspective in EFL and ESP courses by means of creative and innovative methods. Here you can see some of the references that we have used in our research. Thank you very much for listening.